Hello again. In this part, I want to talk about homeostasis. First, I want to tell you what is the meaning of homeostasis and how our body can work to maintain homeostasis for us. Have you ever noticed that your body maintains the average internal temperature about 37 centigrade degree or 98.6 Fahrenheit degree, regardless of the outside temperature? Perhaps you also have noticed that the size of your pupil is altered in response to light intensity which enter your eye, or that your breathing returns to normal shortly after exercise. Your heart rate, blood pressure, the blood level of sugar, and oxygen are also regulated and maintained within the certain parameters. In fact, there are hundreds of anatomic structures and physiologic processes that are continuously monitored and adjust within your body, and they can keep us in the homeostasis and also in the normal limit. The term homeostasis refers to the ability of an organism to maintain a constant internal environment, or a steady state, in response to changing internal and external conditions. Homeostasis is the central theme throughout this text, and you will be learning the specific details about homeostasis in each of the chapters which we have in Anatomy and Physiology 1 and 2. And now I want to talk about the concept of homeostasis. Two general points within the homeostasis is autoregulation or internal regulation. There is a result when cells, organs, and systems adjust its activity automatically, and one of them is called extrinsic regulation, which our nervous system and endocrine system work to maintain homeostasis for us. We have a three components which are associated with each homeostatic reaction. One of them is called receptor, one of them is control center, and the other one is called effector. The receptor can detect the changes in the variable, which is a substance or process that is regulated. A receptor typically consists of sensory neurons or nerve cells. These neurons may be in the skin, internal organ of the body, and a specialized organ like eye, ear, tongue, and nose. The stimulus, which is the change in the variable, physical or chemical factor, such as change in light, temperatures, chemicals like glucose and oxygen level, or a stretching in the muscle, can be detected by receptors. And after that, this information should go to controlling center. The control center is the structure that both interpret input from the receptor and initiate changes through the effector. You can think of it as the go-between for the other two components of homeostatic system. The control center is generally a portion of the nervous system or the organ in our endocrine system. A homeostatic system involving the nervous system provides a relatively quick means of responding to change, like the change which we have in our blood pressure. In contrast, the endocrine system usually provides a means of more sustained response over several hours or days through the release of the hormone. An example is when the parathyroid hormone wants to regulate the level of calcium in our body. And after that, we have effector. The effector is the structure that brings about the change to alter the stimulus. Most body structure can serve as effector, although muscles and exocrine gland are often their effectors. For example, a smooth muscle in the wall of air passageway regulates airflow into and out of our lung. The salivary gland increase their release of saliva to moisten our mouth. So this is the characteristic of the effector. If you look at this diagram, you can see that the stimulus is the change, and this change can happen in internal or external environment in our body. It's detected by our receptors. Then the receptors send the information to the control center or set point, and the control center can both integrate input from receptor and initiate response in our effector. So it's located in between. And then the effectors can cause the change or the effect. And the effectors are most of the times muscles and glands. And homeostasis restored as a result of change from effectors. Homeostatic control systems are separated into two broad categories based on whether the system maintains the variable within the normal range by moving the stimulus in the opposite direction or amplify the stimulus in the same direction. These two types of feedback control are called negative feedback and positive feedback. First, I want to talk about the negative feedback. Most processes in the body are controlled by negative feedback. If the homeostatic system is controlled by negative feedback, the resulting action will always be in the opposite direction of the stimulus. In this way, the variable is maintained within the normal level, which we call it set point. If a stimulus increase, receptor inform homeostatic control system, which activates the effector to decrease it back into normal range. Imagine that the level of sugar in your blood increase. Then the pancreas, as the control center, do something to decrease the level of blood sugar. Or the amount of calcium in our blood decrease. Our parathyroid hormone can do something to increase the level of calcium in our body. So if the stimulus decreases, the receptor informs the homeostatic control center, which activates effector to increase the variable back to its normal range. So in negative feedback, homeostatic control responds to move variable in opposite direction to bring it back to the normal range. Your body temperature increase, your sweat gland start to work, and then by sweating you can cool off your body so the temperature come down. You have hypothermia, then your body system do something to increase your body temperature. This is a negative feedback. Here you can see the negative feedback loop. The body temperature exceeds 37 centigrade degree. The nerve cell in the skin and brain can detect it, and temperature regulatory center in your brain become stimulated, and sweat gland start to work throughout your body. And then you see that the temperature come back again to its normal point. One of the examples which we have for homeostatic reaction is the temperature regulation. And I want to talk about this temperature regulation in this picture. Look at this picture. In this picture, you see that the body temperature decrease. The sensory receptors detect this and signal hypothalamus in the brain. Then these are the receptors which we have in our skin. They send the information to the controlling center, which is our hypothalamus. The hypothalamus sends nerve signals to the smooth muscles of the blood vessel of the skin and cause these blood vessels to go to vasoconstriction. Because of that, when you are chilling, the color of your skin become pale because your blood vessel become more constricted and narrow, and less blood can come to your skin. It wants to retain heat in your body. And the other happening is it can send impulse to a skeletal muscle. The skeletal muscle start to shiver, and by shivering you can warm your body. And also nerve impulses go to a specific type of muscle which we call them arrector pili muscle. And these arrector pili muscle can erect our hair, and when our hair become erected, then it can make goosebump, and this goosebump can retain heat near our body. So what happened? The temperature increase, and we want this. This is a negative feedback loop. The other happening is happen when the temperature increase. Look at here. The exercise or hot environment temperatures raise body temperature above normal. This information is detected by the sensory receptors in skin and other organs. These receptors send temperature information to our brain. Hypothalamus in our brain compares sensory input regarding temperature increase to set point of 37 centigrade degree. So it sends some information to effector organs. What are our effector organs here? First, the blood vessel in the skin, it goes to dilation, and by dilation, you see that the color of our skin become more red and the heat goes out. The sweat gland secretes sweat, and if it evaporated, it can cool off our body, and then the temperature go back to the normal point. Again, this is the negative feedback which happen in our body. The negative feedback is when the response is opposite to a stimulus. The stimulation is increasing the temperature, the response is decreasing, or vice versa. Here you can see the other examples of negative feedback. Withdrawal reflex when we have injury. When you step on a sharp object, immediately you take your feet out of that object. So it's that you do negative feedback. Regulation of heart rate and blood pressure during exercise. Changing breathing rate in response to increased carbon dioxide. Parathyroid hormone release in response to decreased level of calcium, and release of insulin by the pancreas in response to increase the blood glucose. Look at this picture. In this picture, you can see how your body do homeostasis of sugar, blood sugar. When the amount of sugar in our blood increase, then the beta cell in our pancreas can detect it, and they start to make insulin. By the secretion of insulin, the rate of glucose transport into target cell increase, the rate of glucose utilization and ATP production goes up, the conversion of glucose to glycogen in our liver and skeletal muscle increase, the amino acid absorption and protein synthesis goes up, and increased fat synthesis. And all of them can decrease the level of glucose in our body. This is the meaning of negative feedback. Or in this picture, you can see how the thyroid and parathyroid gland can regulate the amount of calcium. When the level of calcium in your blood goes up, the thyroid gland starts making a hormone which we call it calcitonin. The calcitonin has two effects. One of them, excretion of calcium by our kidney, and the other one, calcium deposition in our bone. So when the level of calcium increase, our bone become more and more strong. And then the level of calcium come down. When the level of calcium decrease in the blood, then the other gland become active, which is the parathyroid gland. It starts to release PTH or parathyroid hormone, and the PTH have some effect. One of them is in the kidney, and it doesn't let our kidney to secrete calcium in the urine. One of them is calcium release from the bone. So we have bone absorption and calcium is released. So our bone become weaker. And then we have increased calcitriol production, which can cause more calcium reabsorption. And I will talk about this fact later for you. And all of them can increase the level of calcium. So you see that this is a negative feedback. The level of calcium come down, our body do something to bring it up. And in the first one, the level of calcium increase, our body do something to decrease it. So this is the negative feedback. Now you can answer these two questions. List and describe the three components of homeostatic system. And on a cold day, what are some of the strategies the body uses to conserve heat? But what about the positive feedback? A homeostatic system may also be controlled by positive feedback. The stimulus here is reinforced to continue in the same direction until the climatic event occurs, and our body again returns to homeostasis. Because their end result is to increase the activity, positive feedback mechanism occur much less frequently than negative feedback mechanism. So a stimulation reinforced to continue moving variable in the same direction until a climatic event occurs. Then body returns back to homeostasis. Positive feedback is where the response is the same as a stimulus. And in positive feedback, our response becomes reinforced. Some examples of positive feedback are here. One of them is breastfeeding, and I will talk about breastfeeding in this picture. Look at this picture. Here, the stimulation is happen when babies suckle the breast. The receptors, the sensory receptors which we have in the skin of breast can detect it and send the impulse to the hypothalamus, which is the control center. The hypothalamus starts to send signals to our pituitary gland, and pituitary gland release oxytocin. When the oxytocin is released, it comes to mammary gland. The effector here is the mammary gland, and it pushes the breast to eject more milk. So when we have more suckling, more oxytocin is secreted, we have production of more milk. And you see that this stimulation can magnify the response. This is the example of positive feedback. The other example of positive feedback is blood clotting cascade and uterine contraction during labor or delivery. Look at here, in positive feedback, an initial stimulus produce a response that enhances the change in original condition. And you can see it here. When we have damage to the blood vessel wall, the release of chemicals from the damaged cell increase, and these chemicals can make blood clotting. These clots increase release of chemicals more chemicals increase clotting. So one of them can increase the other one, and they move parallel together. Accelerated clotting means more chemical means accelerated clotting. So we call it positive feedback. And the other positive feedback loop which we have happened during childbirth. When we have the uterine contraction at the time of birth, the information of this contraction, which is the pressure from the fetus, are detected by the nerve ending which we have between the muscles of the uterus. The muscle of the uterus send information to hypothalamus. We have more production of oxytocin. More oxytocin can increase uterine contraction. And increasing in uterine contraction make more pressure on the fetus and more pressure on the uterine wall. Again, more stimulation of hypothalamus, more oxytocin secretion, more contraction. And this is a positive feedback until the baby come out. So this is the positive feedback loop when the stimulation and the response move parallel to each other. And in the last slide, you can see some medical imaging. We can use different methods when we want to work on different structures of the body. Healthcare professionals have taken advantage of medical imaging technique to extend their ability to visualize internal body structures non-invasively, without any cut. Some of the most common techniques which we use are radiography, computed tomography or CT. We have MRI or magnetic resonance imaging, sonography, digital subtraction angiography or DSI, and we have PET, which is the last one. And if you want to know about them more, you can Google them, and you can find how we can use these techniques when we want to do diagnosis of different diseases. We are done with the first chapter, and I will record the next chapter for you soon. Have a good day.